and officially welcome you all to this first taste of Awaken Your Life. We did just open registration in that program. The program does kick off in March. We've got tons of time between now and the beginning of that class, but I love to give insight into my training style, my teaching style. So this being a taste of class, I really hope that you get a sense for how I show up in this content, how I look at coaching, as well as the skills that I like to bring my students into inside of that program. So we'll give a little taster of what that looks like. Throughout the content today, it's a lot of information in 90 minutes. And at the very end, I'll go over the details of Awaken Your Life loosely. There's a full website, awakenyourlifecoach.com, if you want to check out all the details. And even if that program is not for you, I hope that this free class at least gives you some new insight into your own practices as a coach as well. So let's kick things off. So in today's class, we're going to talk about the 5 master skills that I consider of truly transformational coaching. I'm also going to talk about the 3 foundational skills. I don't know where all of y'all come from in your background and your training and your learning around this skill set. So we're going to give some foundational skills as well, and then we'll layer on top of those these 5 other skills that I've been working with inside of my own practice. We'll talk about the most common mistakes I see coaches make, how coaching differs from therapy and consulting, as well as mentoring, and what that looks like as a coach, and why coaching continues to grow year after year. The 2020 ICF survey just came out about a month ago. I recommend reading it. They do a global survey every 4 years, and they did one for 2020, and then they did it again post-COVID to just get a feel for how that has affected our industry. Really interesting information. It's free to read. It's on their website. How to coach clients in a way that maintains their empowerment and sovereignty. Something that I believe is that coaching is a true empowerment tool. And for me, empowerment is maintaining the client at choice at all times. So this is why we don't hand out strategies and quick fixes and how-tos and things like that, because that is not the problem the client is having. We'll talk about that today. As well as why the number one thing missing from your toolbox is also, not a better strategy or another action step. And while those are components of coaching that we need to use, they have a place in the process. And if we put them in the wrong place in the process, we can actually stall our clients, and they don't come to us to stall. They're stalled already. So I would love for you to pop in the chat box. Tell me, what is one thing you hope to walk out of class with today? One specific thing. So I make sure that I speak to each of you that are here live with us. One thing you hope to take out of it. Emma, a reminder what best in class coaching looks like. Awesome. Awesome. A reminder. Yeah, sometimes we just need a refresher. And also even the master skills are very simple in nature. So sometimes it's a reminder that we don't need to make it complicated. We need to get great at the simple things. Awesome. Yeah, what else? Matt said, listening strategically. Yes, listening is such a potent skill. You'd think it was easy. It's remarkable how difficult active listening can actually be, and such a powerful practice that really, I think, affects not just our professional lives, but our personal lives. It's one thing I love about coaching. It enhances all aspects of your relationships in all categories, and listening, that art of listening, is one of the reasons why. Cool. We'll keep popping those notes in there. I love to see and hear why y'all are here today. So who am I? My name is Andrea Lita Wilborn. For those of you who are new to my world or work or have not yet met me, either virtually or in person, I've been a professional coach since 2010. I did my training with the Institute for Life Coach Training called the ILCT. It's an ICF accredited foundational coursework, and since then have layered on thousands of hours of continued education. I am a social worker by training, but I believe that I'm a life coach by calling. I do believe that coaching is a true empowerment tool that actively moves people toward whole self-development and choice. I think it's a really evocative, awesome, creative development opportunity, and I love seeing more people come to this work. And my 200-hour Master Life Coach training, Awaken Your Life, was recently awarded an accredited diploma in coach training by the Association for Coaching. And so this is now my 6th cohort we're going into in the spring of next year. And we are now an accredited training program, which is super exciting to have a whole other body of people taking a peek into what it is we do inside of AYL. So life coaching is defined as, and this is from the Association for Coaching. This is a bit wordy, but I like it. I think it hits all the markers. They define it as a collaborative, solution-focused, results-oriented, and systematic process in which the coach facilitates the enhancement of work performance, life experience, self-directed learning, and personal growth for the coachee. It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. Let's break it down. A collaborative, solution focused. So collaboration presupposes that we are in a co-created relationship, mutually created relationship, even though the container we work within is for the client. We are also benefiting as the coach. It's collaborative in nature. We're not there to dictate or determine or to lead the work. We're there to support, enhance, and facilitate the work. It is solution-focused and results-oriented, meaning we are moving forward. We may have to look into the back, into the past, but we do that for the function and purpose of helping our clients move forward with more ease. And this is also a systematic process the coach facilitates. And so it's not random. There is a protocol that we follow as a coach. It can look random because there's no steps. There really aren't. And I think when we step our work, when we make it a strategy, we bypass all of that creative genius tucked inside of our client and really their capacity to come to resolution on their own. And my goal with my clients is for them not to need me. I want to teach them the ability to coach in their own life. And that doesn't mean they will never not have a coach. I always have a coach of some capacity, but it's not because I feel like I don't know what to do without them. I just really enjoy having that witness in my life. And again, here, the enhancement of work performance, life experience, self-directed learning, and personal growth. And so we're really covering a lot of bases as a coach. And I love that about this work as well. So before I share these 5 master skills today, a few little reminders of where I come from. So if you desire coaching that lends to quick fixes, more strategy, or fast tracking goals with people, fast tracking would be moving to the goal prematurely or moving to a strategy to enhance the goal prematurely. If you desire, I give you blanketed how-tos. That would include steps or how to coach through a very specific process. I'm not your girl. And if you desire a done-for-you pathway as a coach, also inside of your business as a coach, this is not for you. So I'm not going to be the right teacher or facilitator to support you in this pathway. I believe, again, that this is co-creative work. It's mutual. It is process-oriented, and it is open-ended. And so that isn't quick. Transformation is not fast. These are clients bring problems that are not new. And so we can't do this in a single conversation or even a couple of conversations. I believe the arc of transformation takes time. And I think if we commit to that and we're honest about that from the get-go with ourselves and the people we hope to serve, everyone's going to get so much more out of it. I think my average client stays with me anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And I would say the work gets really good around month 12. So if I'm working with someone for 90 days, I'm missing a really substantial chunk of their process. And it might be different for you. And maybe you're not getting that transformation. Maybe you are really, really quickly, but you're having to fill your coaching a ton. Or maybe your clients are staying too long and it starts to get kind of boring and we start to meander. So you have to figure that out on your own. That's just what's been the average for me. Little reminder here. So your clients reach out to a coach or you because they are creative, resourceful, and whole. It's one of the tenets of coaching that I hold strong to. My clients are creative, resourceful, and whole. They've lived a whole life without me. They will live a whole life without me again. They desire to know themselves, grow themselves, and be themselves on purpose. And I think the juncture that brings somebody to coaching is highly personal to that person. But I often find they come to me when there's some sort of transition afloat. There's a change in the air. There is something that they are ready to embark on, personally, professionally, in any category of life. I find most of my clients come to me either for a career change, personal fulfillment, relational work, sometimes work around money or financial success. But it often has that edge of personal desire. There's a personal need not being met in their life that maybe is affecting them professionally or relationally or financially or even in their health. And they want to do this work with purpose and intent. And that's what I think people come to us for. It's a little different than therapy and consulting and mentoring in that respect. So let's look at the differences. And I think they're important to note. It's also important that you can explain this to your clients. Coaching is not therapy. It's not consulting. It's not mentoring. Sometimes it has mentoring components. Sometimes it can look a little bit like consulting if done right. Sometimes it can be very therapeutic in the experience, but it's not intended to be a therapeutic process. So coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. That is from the ICF. Love that definition as well. This to me looks like inside out and outside in. So inside out coaching is working with a client's interior, metaphorically speaking. And interior would be their belief systems, their values, their stories, their emotional well-being, their memories, their habits, their behaviors. Outside in would be working with their choices, decisions, and actions. And I would say in my work, inside out is 80 to 90% of the time. Outside in is 10 to 20% of the time. As a coach, we are what we call an options facilitator. We help facilitate the potential for a better tomorrow by opening up the landscape of options available to people. I can say that again. We facilitate a better tomorrow by opening up more options. We are choice increasing. A client should feel like they have more opportunity in their life because of coaching. Or see things differently creates more opportunity. And it is client-led. As the coach, I am not dictating what the client gets from our work together. Let's look at that in comparison to consulting. And on the next slide, we'll look at it in comparison to mentoring and what I call mending. So consulting is, by definition, the business of giving expert advice to other professionals. This includes systems, models, strategies, and it is consultant-led. Typically, a consultant would be brought in to solve a particular problem, and they're going to use their systems, models, strategies, methodologies to facilitate a solution, give it to those people, hopefully integrate it or coach it into the people who need it, but they are leading that process. Let's look at mentoring. So mentoring, a mentor might share with a mentee or a protege information about his or her own career path, as well as provide guidance, motivation, emotional support, and role modeling. I think of mentoring is handing wisdom down. It's passing down knowledge. It's supporting the next players in your industry. It keeps the game going. It's what keeps our industries afloat, is by having mentors say, here's how to do this. Here's what I wish I had known when I got started. And then mending. Mending is the process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. This would be our healing modalities, therapy, process-focused recovery work, treatments, and returning to wholeness. This would be our mental health, mental well-being, emotional well-being, trauma and grief support, as well as things like transitional support through like divorce or loss. So vastly different categories: coaching, consulting, mentoring, and mending. And I think what's important here to note is that the lens through which you see your work shapes the work and the client's own view of themselves. If you approach your work as a consultant, the client will suppose they're there to learn from you. If you approach your work as a mentor, they suppose that you know more than them. If you approach your work as a mender, they suppose that they need to be healed. And my hope is that if you approach it truly through the eyes of a coach, then that client presupposes they have some potentiality to be activated from within them. And I don't know another tool or development process that is more empowering than that. I'm going to pause here and open it up for questions before we continue into our skills. I see a question here from Emma. She asks, where would you put ECT or somatic release in these definitions? So she's referring to something called emotional clearing technique or somatic release, which is a form of somatic processing, somatic being the body. So working with energy in the body through the coaching realm. Well, let's look at it. So I would put it in a mending category within a coaching context. Meaning, if we're going to use any kind of release technique or energetic healing modality as a coach, are we framing it in a way that keeps the client at choice? Or are we framing it to say, this is going to take away all your pain? Which I'm careful to never say, because nothing ever works in the way that it just doesn't work like that. Nothing is a quick fix or a one-stop shop. And so we use these to facilitate the client having more access to themselves, not to heal the client for the client. And I think if we put it in a mending context, that's what we would be saying. But think of these things as tools. Everything's a tool. Coaching in itself is a tool. But through the framework of a coach, it's about keeping that person at choice. I hope that helps. Awesome. All right. Any other questions at this stage of the class? While I get a sip of water, right? Let's keep going. So as I said in the beginning of class, I want to begin with some foundational skills because I don't know everyone's background that comes into my work or my classes or my community. So these are what I could consider foundational skills. These are non-negotiable. These are happening all the time in the context of coaching. They're very simple. I think so simple that we want to make them more complicated than necessary. I think the best coaching is actually very pared back. So active listening, powerful questions, and container setting. These are, again, foundational. And think of them not as foundational like rudimentary, but foundational like they support everything else. And these are in order. Active listening. We listen to, for, and with. I'll go over those in a second. Using your presence and ability to hear your clients, you can place your whole awareness onto their life. So when we listen to, we're listening directly and verbatim to what the client is telling us, word for word. We're taking in the information as it is being shared. When we listen for, we're listening for what's not being said, what might be the meaning behind what's being said. So we're taking what they're telling me, but I'm presupposing that that's not the whole story. So I'm listening for what might be beneath that, which really means we need to listen with. And when we listen with, we're listening with our whole self. So our gut, our heart, our intuition, our own knowledge base, our own awareness, our own experience inside of this work over time. And then we can layer in powerful questions. Powerful questions are open-ended, and that cannot be answered with a yes or a no. So a closed question is something that can be answered yes or no. An open question beckons the client to create some narrative. They elicit a narrative, an explanation, and an exploration from the client. And all of this happens within something called a container. The coaching container is what I would call the circle of safety. And it's created and maintained by the coach through intention, trust, and rapport that has to be demonstrated consistently over time. The container is a metaphorical space. Even if you see clients in person in an office, we still have to create the container energetically. That's through doing what we say we're going to do. It's through how we communicate with our clients. It's through the agreements and contracts we set up. It's through the way we show up. And it's how we listen and how we ask questions. So again, these are foundational, as in supporting the whole process. active listening, powerful questions, container setting. And again, very simple stuff. But if you just mastered this, you would be golden. And I find that most coaches move on from this way too quickly. I'm 10 years in and I'm still working on my skill of listening. I'm still working on my skill of powerful questions. It gets easier over time, but it's where the bulk of the work is actually going to come from. So on top of that, we can layer some things that I might call a master skill. These skills are guidelines. Again, they're not how-to steps or processes. I don't teach that way, because then you would get really firm on the process and the step, and you would forget to listen and be loose and ask good questions and maintain the container. These skills are also something I recommend you take one at a time. So pinpoint a skill that you'd like to begin practicing in your own work and try it on for a while, a few months, if you will, and see what happens, see what doesn't happen, see how the frame of the skill changes the work, if at all. All right, the first one, starting the right conversation. Anyone can be a conversationalist, but that doesn't mean everyone can be a coach. There's a big difference. A coaching conversation has 3 benchmarks that make it transformational: purpose or goal setting, connecting new dots that has to come from within the client, and new feedback through actions. Let's go over those in a little bit more detail. Purpose or goal setting. Starting the right coaching conversation hinges on accurately naming the right purpose for coaching. And I wouldn't trust my client to name it accurately at first, not because they don't know, but because we may not know the whole story. So why is this person pursuing this work? What is it they think coaching will yield them that they don't already have in their life? And what do they think that's going to solve for them? We don't pursue coaching for just the surface sake of the goal. There's meaning we've given to that goal. We've made it mean something about who we'll be in the future if we accomplish that goal. Well, I need to understand that, because that's the real purpose of coaching. And the goal is just the red herring. It's the fruit. It's the thing at the end of the line. It's the beacon of light that keeps us going. But what the goal does for us, or who it creates us to be, or how it changes our identity of ourselves, that's the work. Connecting new dots. So this is something that most coaches try and do for their clients, and it's where most coaching fails. I cannot connect the dots for you. You need to connect the dots for yourself, even if I see them. Even if I see them, because we maintain that 30,000 foot perspective as coaches. We hang out in the big meta purpose. We have this awesome viewpoint of our clients' lives, but giving that to them is not going to solve things for them. Even if the client asks you, what would you do if you were me? Don't take the bait. Don't take it. So when a client connects new dots, I mean that literally and figuratively. Literally in the brain, the client has to make new neural pathways and new associations in order for that new habit to form, in order for the new emotional attachment to be created, in order for the new action to be demonstrated, in order for the goal to be created in real time. And I can't do any of that from outside of someone's body. So it has to come from within the client. And third, new feedback through action. So the client is beginning to move in the direction of the thing they said they wanted, with their own choices, with their own ahas and revelations. Then they go and take some action. You get some immediate feedback, and we get to work with that feedback. And feedback can be anything inside or outside. So inside the body being emotional feedback. How did it make them feel? It could be behavioral feedback. And outside feedback could be how people are treating them, how they see themselves. Do they physically have something they didn't have before? So on the flip side of this are things that I see coaches do instead. So here's where we might be getting stuck. prohibiting us from asking or starting the right conversation. So number one, I see a lot of coaches obsess over the how. I understand that you want to create resolution for your clients. I get it. You want them to not struggle. You want them to not suffer. You want them to have everything they've ever wanted, and you want them to have it now. And we think if we could just answer, how are we going to do that as quickly as possible, then we'll be magicians. But you aren't meant to have the answers. Your client needs to have the answers. And it never ceases to amaze me when a client comes to an aha or a solution from within their own thinking. It is always 100% of the time not the thing I would have asked them to do. So I don't need to worry about the how. I need to worry about all the things that are getting in the way of them answering the how for themselves. Number two, I see coaches who don't trust what's right in front of you or right within. Meaning, work with what is. Within everything your client shares is the key that unlocks their problem. Within everything the client shares. But if you're thinking about the next question 4 minutes down the road, if you're obsessing about something they said 5 minutes ago and you're not actively listening to the words coming out of their mouth in real time, you're not trusting that there's enough information here for you to work with. And three, I see coaches looking for the wrong guarantee. Outcomes are great. I get it. Results are wonderful. We don't hire coaches to just feel better. We hire them to help us actualize in real time very specific wants and needs or desires. But forcing the outcome to feel validated in your process will fail the client. It's not up to me how long it's going to take. I trust my process. My process works. Coaching works every time, but it doesn't always work in the same time every time. Sometimes it works in 30 days. Sometimes it works in 30 months. And I'm very honest with my clients about that. So I can't look for validation in big ahas in every conversation. I have to look for micro wins. And again, coming back to, am I staying connected to the purpose? Am I helping them connect new dots? And are they getting new feedback from new choices and actions in real time? That's measurable in every conversation. All right, questions on master skill number one, starting the right conversation before we move on. Okay, so a few ways to practice this. And I do see, okay, great. List every single how you're attempting to answer upfront for your client or clients. It still happens to me. I just got to call myself out on it in every conversation. What are all the how questions you're trying to answer for them? If you trust that the client has what they need, then how would you approach each conversation? You may need to know that up front as a reminder going into the calls. And three, what guarantee do you attempt with each conversation and what's been the outcome of this? In other words, when do you tend to force the outcome and what typically happens when you do that? So I'll pause and let you all write these down. Again, these are just ways to practice or be in relationship with the skill of starting the right conversation, right? And again, you're getting the slide deck, so if I go a little quickly here, you'll get access to all of it. All right, master skill number two, what story is running the show? One of my favorite places to work with clients within. In every problem or every goal your client brings to you, there's a story. A story is an assumption your client is telling themselves about themselves, and it doesn't matter if it's quote unquote true. In fact, it's probably not true, but that doesn't matter because if they're living their life from that story, it's creating real things in their life, then that story has to be treated as truth. The skill is, are you clear on the story you're actually coaching? There are often two stories at play in my clients' experiences. The story they think they're telling themselves and the story they're actually living in relationship to. The story someone thinks they're telling themselves is and this is not a criticism, we all do this, it's the places we inflate our ability, the places we inflate our ability to make different choices in the future, the places we pretend it will be different magically tomorrow, the habits or behaviors we tend to downplay or justify away. And the client is going to come in with some inflated version of themselves. A, clients want to be good students. And B, because we don't think we're doing anything differently. Then there's the story that we're actually in relationship to. And that's the story we can only tell by looking at the current results of anyone's life. If I want to know the story you're living, all I have to do is to look at the current circumstances of your existence in all areas. And it will tell me a story. And that's the story I have to coach, because that's the part of you that is unchanging up till now. That's the part of you that has created the problem we're in here to solve. And the other story, the other more generous story about yourself is probably the one that set the goal, but they're not the same part. And as a coach, if we only focus on the goal setter in our clients, we're not going to have much success. Setting goals is easy. The actualization of a goal is quite difficult. And we're going to get into that more in one of our skills when we talk about working with the brain. So what story is running the show? Is the client even aware of what is running the show? And are you seeing what's running the show over time? This is another reason I don't like to work with clients for one session or 2 sessions or even 4 sessions. I need time to see over time the themes that continue to come in, the tendencies, their habits, their defaults, their behavior when things get hard, because that's when the work gets really good. Here's what I see coaches do instead. The sage old advice, just do it. Worst thing you could ever say to a client. There is no just doing it. Ever, ever, ever. Your client doesn't lack motivation or willpower. They really don't. Willpower is not the problem. Motivation is not the problem. And if you tell them to just go do it, they will borrow your willpower while the coaching is fresh and exciting. But as soon as it's no longer fresh and exciting and that willpower or motivation goes away, the just do it strategy will fail. Who they are is running the show, not what they're doing. What this means is our actions are a byproduct of how we see ourselves. Our actions are a byproduct of our identity. And your identity is dictating actions. So if you tell a client just to hang out with different actions, bypassing who they are, you're not actually making a change. You're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It will give the illusion of change for a short amount of time. But we have to coach the who, not the what. When you coach the who, the what's organic. Outside in. So when we're just coaching outside in, working solely from the outside in misses the piece of the client who actually has to make the changes necessary. Again, it's another version of just do it. Outside in coaching is anything that has to do with strategy, action steps, tips, choices, habits, things like that. Those things have to change in order for results to happen, but we don't need to work on them as much as you think. And third, I see coaches not fully understanding the real problem. You have to demonstrate that you understand your client's problem better than they do. And you can't do that if you don't actually get access to the problem. And the problem is never what they present with. It's what we call the thing beneath the thing. Can you get to the real root of the problem? Why don't clients present it up front? Because we don't know. We truly don't know. We know the byproduct of the problem, because that's why we seek coaching. We say, I don't have enough money, or I'm not getting enough clients, or I can't seem to get healthy, or my relationships are always ending so quickly. That's feedback that says there is a problem, but it isn't the problem. And so we don't want to get distracted by the outcomes in a client's life. We go, well, that's some interesting feedback. What's creating that every single time? That's what I need to get access to. And when I can coach that, those outcomes will change organically. Questions on this master skill? What story is running the show, before we go to our practice corner slide? And again, you can use the chat box. You can also unmute yourself if you want to say hello. All right, let's go to the practice corner. What is the story my client is telling themselves, and what is the consistent outcome of this story? What would inside out coaching sound like, or look like, or feel like as the coach? And what is the root of the problem my client is struggling with? I find that the root is often 3 to 4 layers beneath the presenting problem. And that's why we have to get really skilled at listening and asking powerful questions, because it's powerful questions with a keen ear for what you're hearing that helps us excavate that root. And you'll know when you've hit it. The client will know when you've hit it. There'll be an audible, oh, or oh my gosh, or that's a good question, or this is now coming up for me. They'll start to give you feedback that sounds like new dots are being connected. So I'll pause here and let you write these questions down. And again, these are just guideposts for you as a practitioner to think about or reflect on as you go into your conversations. All right, master skill number 3, getting to the heart of it. We are emotional creatures. We are. It's one of the gifts, I think, of being human, no matter how you look at it. And our ability to store memory, manifest compassion, carry empathy, I think is one of our most beautiful qualities. And your clients will bring emotion to the work, and how you greet it matters. Now, I said this early on, coaching is not therapy, but it can have a therapeutic experience for people because you're going to welcome emotion in. I hope you do. I think the mark of a masterful coach is the ability, in part, to sit with emotion without trying to fix it, without diagnosing because of it, and without cajoling with the emotion or enabling the client to stay where they are. One of the reasons that I am that Awaken Your Life as a program is accredited by the Association for Coaching and not the ICF is because the ICF has a pretty strong, I don't want to use negative language, they do not allow their programs to work with emotions. And yet as a practitioner, I found very early on, there is no single conversation that emotion doesn't enter the conversation. And so it felt unethical to not be trained in working with emotion. So I went and figured out how to do it without being a therapist, because I'm not a therapist. But working with emotion is key, because emotions are what keep memories intact. A significant memory is only significant because an emotion is connected with it. And if we can't key into that, then we're missing a whole pocket of information we need to work with as a coach. So how do you key into the heart of it without healing or treating your clients? Here's what I see people do instead. Asking, how does that make you feel? There are infinitely better questions than how does that make you feel? Truly. We don't need to ask how it makes you feel. I know how it makes you feel. You're telling me, and more likely you're showing me, because you are bringing the emotion up. You are being in the emotion. You're emoting in the moment. Clients will cry. They'll laugh. They'll get frustrated. They might get angry. They'll get excited. They get passionate. They get frustrated. They get depressed. They get apathetic. They are human. But instead of saying, how does that sadness make you feel? I might say, I'm noticing some sadness. What's going on? What's coming up for you? What is it pointing to? What about that invokes this emotion? What do you think about that? How long has that emotion been there? What do you think it's asking of you? I am just an archaeologist. I'm just curious. Ooh, there's emotion there. What does that mean? What is it connected to? What memories are popping up? Why does that matter? I also see coaches assume that they need rescuing. Your client's emotional life does not qualify them for therapy. I want to be clear. Being emotional or having trauma or experiencing loss does not qualify you for being diagnosed or prescribed medicine or going to see a therapist. Therapy is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I trained in therapy. I love therapy. I've seen many a therapist. I think that their body of work is so fundamental to the mental well-being of so many of us. And I think we can overly use it at times when coaching could be a more proactive opportunity. And so the emotion your client presents does not need to be rescued. It's information. Treat it as information and maintain that compassionate space as a coach in that container. And you can treat it as information without coming across harsh or apathetic to what their client is sharing. Third, I see a lot of coaches fear the tears. Emoting is a powerful resource and it's a big release button. Let your client be seen in their emotion. I think when a client, and it can happen sometimes very early on, cries in session, A, it's an indication of safety. B, it's an indication of being seen or witnessed. C, it's an indication that something finally got released that maybe hasn't been released in a long time. What a gift. What a gift. So I see a question here from Emma. Tips for not crying with your client. Generally, I'm fine, but occasionally a tear will pop out. Congratulations, you're an empathetic human being with a sensitive soul who cares for people. Fantastic. I think what can happen, and this has happened to me too, sometimes crying with a client tells the client, what you're telling me is so devastating, I can't contain myself. But what if to the client, they're actually not experiencing devastation? It might come across as a type of judgment. So we have to be mindful of that. Sometimes crying with a client tells the client, I'm 100% here with you. And what you are experiencing is deeply sad. And I'm sad with you. I don't pity you. I don't sympathize for you. I feel with you. And if it's something that you know is probable in your process, I would tell the client right up front. Sometimes when clients share things with me, I can't help but emote with them. And I need you to know it's not because I pity or find sadness in what you're saying, but because I'm a deeply empathetic person and the emotion will come through me. How might you receive that as a client? Have a conversation. It's a collaborative space. Set the tone. This may happen. Recently, I was on a retreat with a group of women, and it was the anniversary of a significant life event in my life. And I hadn't talked about it, and it came up at dinner, quote unquote, randomly. And I looked around the table, and several people were crying. And it made me feel very vulnerable, but it made me feel very seen as a human. And there was a lot of compassion at that table. And I was incredibly grateful for that. And it wasn't talked about. I could see it on their faces. Sometimes I think not being alone in our emotion is a huge gift. And sometimes when we keep that separation so stark, like robotic, it can make the client feel like they're crazy. They're not crazy. They're having a real human life here. I am too. So I think having an honest conversation with them can be helpful. All right, practice corner for the heart of it, getting to the heart of it. What are 10 more insightful questions than how does that make you feel? I would come up with these in advance knowing that emotion is going to come up. And again, the client's not going to say, oh, that makes me feel sad. No, they're just going to be sad. Or that makes me angry. They're just going to be angry. So what are 10 more insightful questions when emotion presents itself than talking about the emotion itself? Number 2, when do I tend to want to rescue my clients? And it's okay if you if you want to, just don't. Just don't. Our clients don't need rescuing. We don't need rescuing. We don't need fixing. We don't need mending. We don't need something that tells us we're broken. We need more opportunity. We need more choice. We need to thrive. So when do I tend to want to rescue my clients? When do I tend to pity them, even if I wouldn't call it pity? When do I feel bad for my clients? Pity is one of the most disempowering things we can put onto somebody, because it tells somebody without language, your situation is so dire, you have no chance. And coaching is literally there to give people new chances. And number 3, what do I believe about my client's emotional life that can scare me spending time in my client's emotions? What am I afraid is going to happen when emotion comes up? Now, I want to be clear, in coaching, I do not work with PTSD. I do not work with any what we might call a mental illness or presenting mental issues that a client is saying, I'm here to work on depression, I'm here to work on grief, I'm here to work on trauma. I don't do that. That is for therapy. But if a client has trauma in their life, side note, I've never worked with a client who doesn't have trauma somewhere in their existence. So it's there. If a client has had loss and has grief in their life, let's do it. Coaching is a great process. If the client wants to work on grief, I'm just not built for that. So I want to be clear about the differentiation, and we do need to know when to refer out so we can stay in our lane. Skill number 4, between the ears. Your brain, wonderful machinery. While functioning as one system, your brain is made up of 3 parts, and it's in quotations because it's not actually separated. It's called the triune brain theory. And we have the reptilian brain. I'll go over these in a little bit more detail. The mammalian brain and the human brain. The reptilian brain is our oldest brain, developed the furthest ago. It is our fight or flight brain. It is the part of us that is only concerned with safety and survival. It processes a lot of information through the sensory system. And by a lot, I mean billions of bits of information every second. You're not conscious of this. You're only conscious of it if you need to be. Your mammalian brain, that's our center for belonging, connection, memory, emotion, attachment. It's our second oldest brain. It's something we have in common with all mammals, all herd species, tribe species, school species, anything that operates in community with some sort of hierarchy, that's mammals. And then our human brain, also known as your prefrontal cortex, is your youngest brain. It's a very slow processing piece of ourselves. It has a left and a right hemisphere. It is concerned with logic, creativity, linear thinking, forward moving, goal setting. It's very rational. If that part of the brain was in charge of getting out of the way when a car was coming, you would not live very long. It doesn't process information nearly as quickly, whereas your reptilian brain jumps out of the way before it is even conscious that it has jumped. If you've ever put your hand on something hot, you know exactly what I mean. You pull away, and then you feel, oof, the searing pain of having been burned after you've moved the hand. So the prefrontal cortex isn't in charge of that function. Now, your clients come to you from the human brain. They're thinking about the future. But you can't only coach the human brain. You have to coach safety and belonging, likely 99% of the time. And do you know which brain you're coaching? Do you know which brain you default to coaching? And if this is brand new for you, then chances are you're hanging out a lot in the human brain. So here's what I see people do instead. They assume their clients are self-sabotaging. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. It is biologically and evolutionarily impossible to self-sabotage. And I want to be perfectly clear, this is not arguable. I don't mean that to be like definitive, but it's not arguable. Self-sabotage is it's defined as the deliberate destruction of a target. Your brain is simply not designed to self-implode. It is not. You are hardwired for safety. Hardwired. You can't undo it. The military even tried. You cannot unhook from your survival mechanism. It's impossible. So anything that we might deem as quote unquote self-sabotaging behavior is really us retreating to safety in a way that makes sense to our brain, literally makes sense through the sensory system to our brain. Now the human brain might go, that is not rational. Why would I do the opposite of what I want? Because what I want and what I deem safe aren't always the same thing. So if a client is hitting an upper limit, coming up against a boundary internally, and they continually, quote unquote, self-sabotage, let's rephrase that as the client is retreating to safety, which tells me the thing they're pursuing is happening too quickly, too slowly, or we're not clear why we're going there. Number 2, you're coaching the wrong brain. Again, the brain that hires you is not the brain that shows up to coaching. The brain that hires you is very generous in its thinking. It thinks that tomorrow will be magically different. It doesn't just hope so, it banks on that hope. It's always surprised when things don't change. Like it really doesn't understand. It's very goal-oriented, linear processing, and slow functioning. And that is the reason people hire you and me, is because the human brain said there's something else out there for us. That's great. I want to align all of my client with that part of themselves, but that is not the brain that I coach. I mostly coach within the mammalian brain, maintaining safety at all times. Which brings me to number 3. If your coaching is happening too quickly or too slowly, or there isn't a clear reason why it's happening, this will register to the brain as what we call a threat. And the client will appear to shut down, move away. It might look like you broke rapport. The client will stop showing up. They'll start canceling sessions. That is not because the client is lacking will or motivation. You've triggered some safety mechanism in them. And this is client by client, and that can be the hardest part, which is why I do not have a prescriptive series of steps for everybody, because it would be to negate the entirety of my people. Everyone's different. Questions on master skill number 4, between the ears. Awesome. Question here. What do you do when a client stops booking sessions? How do you bring them back on track? Well, first we have to understand what happened before the happening happened. So what's the last thing what's the last engagement you had with your client before they stopped booking sessions? First, I want to take myself either into or out of the equation. Was I a participant in them stopping booking? Did something happen in their life? Did something happen in the world that affected them or they perceived affected them? So that's the first thing I want to do, is I want to understand what happened before the happening happened. Getting them back on track, we have to come back to safety and container setting 101. I send an email that predominantly checks in to make sure that they're okay. And then checks that I notice we haven't had a session in a bit. I'd love to get you rescheduled. Please tell me how to go forward. I take all threat out of the equation. I do not use scarcity. I do not threaten them with money. I do not tell them it'll be a late fee. I do not pile on the fear. I want to extract as much fear as possible from the equation and make sure that if it was my doing, I can be a part of the resolution as well. Michelle asks, so then does therapy hit the reptilian brain? Depends on the therapist. That's my honest opinion. I think it depends on the therapist. I think it's supposed to. And actually a lot of what people might pursue therapy for lives in the mammalian brain. and mostly lives in conjunction with something called the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, which I will not go into detail today. And then some things that people would pursue therapy for live in the reptilian brain, depending on the spectrum of trauma, depending on the event, depending on the associations, and depending on the approach of the therapist. This is why microdosing and psilocybin is such an incredible therapeutic tool, because it helps downregulate the ACC, which is inside the mammalian brain, giving people access to healing modalities. We're seeing people heal from trauma in less than a single session. Not as a coach in the therapy world. I'm off track, but that's where that might come in a really potent way. Awesome. Any other questions on this skill number 4? Okay, practice corner. If my client is not self-sabotaging, then what instead is happening? I gave you the answer. I gave you the answer. Safety is happening. Number 2, what is my client's primary goal? What that means is, if we go back to you're coaching the wrong brain, if the goal isn't just the thing they presented with, but there's a secondary goal, safety, belonging, connection, maintaining my perception of self, telling a better story, am I coaching the primary thing behind the goal? And 3, do I tend to speed up, slow down, or be ambiguous in my coaching? And is my approach working with this client specifically? With this client? You have to ask it for every client. And you also never meet the same person twice. So sometimes you have to ask it in every session with every client. All right, let's keep going. Master skill number 5, for what purpose? We don't just seek coaching to feel a little better about our life. We seek coaching to unearth longings and desires tucked inside of our lives, both personally and professionally. And coaching gets to connect to a bigger purpose. I think coaching, when facilitated in a transformational way, truly does change somebody's life for the better, for the long haul. I know, as I can only speak from experience as a client on that, when I've had phenomenal coaching, and I've been the receiver of both really great coaching and really shitty coaching, and I can tell you, really clearly skilled coaching is life altering. It is where I have had some of my biggest breakthroughs. It's changed my relationship. It has changed my relationship to money and my body and my health. It's changed my relationship to my worth. It helped me navigate grief. It helped me navigate my identity as a gay woman, being a business owner, not being a mother. These are significant themes that, in a society that doesn't always mirror back my truth, had the capacity to be very troublesome for me. And it was through a combination, but predominantly coaching experiences, that brought me to a very high self-worth, grounded place in my life. Very fulfilling to be seen by someone who wants the best for you. That's a huge gift. And I think we have to always be asking, what is the greater purpose here that I may not fully understand is going to have an impact beyond these conversations? I always assume it's possible. But what I see some coaches do instead is meander. Meandering in coaching gets boring really, really quickly. Meandering looks like, okay, what are we talking about today? How have you been? What's up? What's new? What now? It forgets that we came here with some pretty significant or purposeful intent. Sessions are not randomized to help someone just feel better. They are micro doses of a macro picture. And that brings me to number 2. Sometimes we keep it really, really small, and sometimes we make it way too big. The work happens in micro chunks, but what is the bigger picture you're moving toward? And so I do want you to keep it small, but I want you to keep it small in context of the bigger picture. And 3, I see coaches stay on the surface. Are you actively asking your client about the bigger meaning of this work? Because it's there. They may not have named it, but they're pursuing this work with you because of it. It may not always be talked about, but I assume it's running in the background of what motivates them to get up and be a different person today, try a different action, do the different thing, tell a better story, etc., etc. So what is the purpose? A few ways to bring this into your practice. What are all the bigger reasons someone might pursue coaching, and are you conveying these to them? Are you speaking about that bigger picture in your messaging, in your marketing, in your content creation, in your emails, in how you show up? How do you hope your coaching contributes to the whole of humanity? Yes, I am so audacious to make that statement, to make that claim. I do think working with individuals in a purposeful way puts a ripple in the pond. I just have to trust it. And I may never fully get access to the impact any one of these conversations has on somebody's life. I'm okay with that. But I do think that this work contributes to the greater good of the planet, one person at a time. That's where I've chosen to place my energy and my effort. I don't just do that to help a few people feel better. I truly want to see people be brave and activate whatever that potentiality that is inside of them into the world, because they are worth knowing themselves and being known by themselves. And that brings me to 3. Is this work spiritual to you? It doesn't have to be. It is for me. And I think that spiritual component, the bigger picture, the for what purpose, that's important for me. And when I know that and I keep myself in relationship to that, it gives me more fulfillment every minute of every coaching call I get to have. So what questions do you have on these skills I've given you here today before we dive into a little bit of information about Awaken Your Life specifically? And again, this is just a taster. Everything I've talked about here is inside the program. Of course, it's inside the program. I love this work, but what questions do you have about anything that's been presented today? And again, you can use the chat box or you can unmute yourself and say hello. All right, well, you're welcome to pop those in there as we go. I do want to share about the content of the program. So Awaken Your Life is a 200-hour master coach training program, and it was recently awarded a accredited diploma in coach training from the Association for Coaching. That is a mouthful. That is a mouthful right there. I just have a few slides here to talk about the big picture of the program, but I encourage you to go to the website if you want to check out all the details, awakenyourlifecoach.com, and the program does begin on March 22nd, 2021. So I love this quote from The Prosperous Coach, which is also a book I highly recommend every coach read. I love this book. There are bits of this book I don't love. I can put that aside to see the bigger picture. It's a really wonderful manual for coaches, and it keeps the simplicity at the heart of what we do, and that remembering it can be simple and transformative. And in the book, they say the coaching profession has a problem that is twofold. There's a low bar for entry and a high bar for success. And I could not agree more. For such a magnificent tool as coaching, I'm really saddened to see so many coaches either not take it seriously enough to be prepared for the type of work they actually want to be doing, or not having the type of success that they truly got into this to have, both personally and professionally. And that is a problem. And if you read the stats that came out in the ICF, I'm not surprised by any of the stats in the recent survey. But we've got some work to do. And one of my goals as a trainer and an educator in this work is to better prepare my coaches for both the depth they want to experience with their clients and also the way of being in their business that is truly fulfilling for the goals you have financially and professionally, and whatever you might claim would be successful for you. So there are 5 modules in the program, and it takes 7 months to go through all 5. We kick things off with the way of transformation. This is the preparation stage, and it's for creating a container that centers the co-relationship with your clients. It is the first couple weeks of the program. We kick the program off with a 5-day retreat in person in my favorite place on the Oregon coast, and that is included in the cost of the program. But we start the program together as a community and a cohort. It's a very small program, but even still, I want you to have deep in personal access to each other so that you can trust each other to support one another in the work that unfolds. And we start with a really important topic on transformation. It's the foundation of everything that is going to be layered on that comes after. And the way of transformation is, in essence, the ICF's foundational training. It is not ICF content, it's my content, but it would be what we would consider that foundational work on which everything else gets layered. Then we move into the way of the mind. The way of the mind is the work on the mental life, the thought life, the part of you that is a great storyteller, the part of you that thinks rationally, that wants things just to make sense in their nice little boxes, even if those stories are not true. So I want you to understand how your stories affect the way you see the world and the choices you're actively making. Inside the way of the mind, we work on limiting beliefs and values, habits, behaviors, storytelling, upper limits, all of the things that the client come in and says, this is why I can't do this. This is the thing I'm always struggling with. This is how I know I can't do this thing, even though I want to do this thing. So we're working on the mental constructs of how we look at ourselves in our life. We also look at something called model of the world. Everyone has a model of the world. And if you can't understand how your client sees the world, it's pretty impossible to help them transform their world from within their own eyes. Module 3 is the way of the heart. We move into that emotional ground, that wonderful seat in fabric and texture that gives our life a lot of meaning. Your emotional life, to me, is your core. And this is the part of your brain that houses memory, key influential moments, and makes up meaning about your stories and the things that have happened to you. It's all your perception and perspective. Inside the way of the heart, we do look at things like trauma-informed spaces, grief, forgiveness, working with negative and positive emotions, gestalt threads, how memory is made, how it's formed, how it's implanted in our brain, and why it's important that we be in a healthy relationship with all of our emotions. In Module 4, we move into the way of the ground. Your physical life is your reality interpreted by the brain. So we're going to work with the triune brain theory, learn how the brain makes literal sense of the world and uses that information to form behaviors, habits, and choices, as well as decisions. If you can't speak brain, transformation is going to be just a little bit harder. And so we cut to the heart of it in the way of the ground, and we look at how to make change plausible, speaking through the language of the brain. Module 5 is the way of the crown, and we work on our spiritual life. To me, the spiritual life is our source. And how you practice spirituality is personal. There's no dogmatic teachings whatsoever in the way of the crown. In this section, you'll learn key concepts, things about the soul and consciousness and purpose and callings, how to develop a personal and powerful relationship with your intuition, and how to bring that meta picture into the work with your clients if it's of interest or importance to you. In addition, there is over 200 hours of hands-on training that is accredited. There's the 5-day opening retreat on the Oregon coast. There's a 4-day closing immersion in Portland. You have 2-hour training sessions every week. They are not pre-recorded. They are live instruction with me and your cohort. You have monthly peer practice classes. You have monthly private coaching with myself. There is a Awaken Your Life curriculum workbook, as well as a private online group, weekly accountability, and a small community of 10 students or less. So it's a very intimate program. And as I said early in today's class, this will be my 6th cohort since 2017. And we are recently awarded the Accredited Diploma in Coach Training, also called the APCT, from the Association for Coaching. Check them out. I'd also recommend checking out the Global Coaching Mentoring Alliance. They also house the ICF. So if you want to go down the rabbit hole about governing bodies and industry standards, what the heck it means, does it matter, do I have to be certified or accredited? Please ask me. This is an important topic, and if you're going to be a practicing coach, I think it's something you need to have a good understanding of for your own future as well as for your clients and what they purchase when they hire you. So upon completion, you'll graduate as a certified Awaken Your Life Master Life Coach and be eligible with the Association for Coaching for accreditation as a coach on one of 8 tracks. They have a lot of opportunity inside of their programs. I'm looking for 10 change makers to start with us. Early bird enrollment is open until December 31st. What that means is early bird is a commitment to registration. It includes an application and a deposit. And then you get early bird pricing whether you pay in full or you make payments. And that early bird ends the end of this year. Option 1, don't enroll. Honestly, this is not for everybody. And I'm hopeful that you got something that you needed today. Maybe you're here and you've already done the program. Option 2, submit an application. The program is designed for a very small community. And so because of this, I have a 1-hour conversation with every single applicant, not negotiable. You can't just sign up on the website, because this is also a community of people that are going to be in each other's lives, likely for a long time. Every cohort has graduated this program, are still very close in real life. And so I'm very mindful of who I put in my programs. And if you want to have a conversation, your next step is simply to submit an application. We begin March 22nd. That opening retreat in the Way of Transformation is March 22nd to the 26th out here in Oregon. And the next enrollment after this is the spring of 2022. So for the first time, I'm only running one program next year instead of 2. And you can find everything at awakenyourlifecoach.com. And Casey also has the links in the chat box. In addition, we have our Planning for a Successful 2021 coming up on November 24th. It is a 4-hour half-day live workshop with me via Zoom, and it is pay what you can. All the details in the links. Casey is putting those in there as we speak. That's all I got, y'all. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last hour and 20-ish minutes. I will stay here if you have questions. If you have to pop off, no worries. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it so much, and I hope to see you all maybe in the program, or maybe in the community, or maybe in an inbox, or somewhere else altogether different in the future. Thank you all. Take care. Have a good day.